Dave here, and today we're going to check out the work of Mark Kolobaev. He's based in Belgorod, Russia, and he is a senior concept artist at Terraform Studios. He does more 3D, heavily rendered types of artwork. I'm going to be ignoring most of his portfolio, and the reason why I'm actually featuring this guy or reviewing this guy's work is because of his 2D stuff. And I actually find his 2D paintings or his experiments way more interesting and more vibrant. I mean, his 3D rendered stuff looks pretty amazing, very, very high quality stuff. But again, I'm more of a 2D guy, so I'll be focusing obviously on his 2D paintings. Right? Oh, by the way, this guy has he has a YouTube channel. He also has a Gumroad. He sells a lot of tutorials on his ArtStation store as well. And I believe he has an Instagram as well. I will be linking all of the links in the description below, so no worries. So he does, in his 2D stuff, he mostly does environments, and sometimes he'll do characters. But most of his 2D stuff does focus more on like keyframe types of environments. And they're not design heavy types of environments. Most of them are actually more landscapes. Similar to Jordan Grimmer. If you check out his YouTube channel, at least based on his YouTube channel, he does more landscape types of environments. But for Mark Kolobaev, he does focus more on cinematic types of shots or keyframe types of shots, and I think he does work on a lot of films. So yeah, and it's pretty good with photo bashing as well. It's not super strong, but it's there, right? You can see a bit of that blur effect, and that's usually a result of expanding a photo. So he's not too picky with the photos, he just kind of gets it done. This piece here actually reminds me a bit of John McCoy, who also does a lot of movie keyframe types of artwork, and he does have a personal piece where the composition is kind of similar. And you can see here he did add this kind of black border on the top and bottom part of this frame, and it does make it more cinematic, right? And it does fit this, I believe it's a 2.39:1 ratio. And it does make it look more cinematic, right? I'm not sure if 16:9 is used anymore in most films. I think people are focusing more on this type of frame ratio or aspect ratio, and you can see here, maybe there's a bit of photo textures, but it's kind of hard to tell, or it's not super clean. A lot of his 2D stuff isn't as clean as I would expect. They're more like sketches to me. But again, they actually feel more like experimentations. And what I do like about this type of approach is it's more about the idea. It's very, very typical of concept art types of artwork where it's not super refined. Because there are marketing artists or illustrators for that, but for concept artists, they don't always have the cleanest kind of look, but the idea is there essentially, right? And it does include a lot of hues in his paintings, 2D paintings. You can even see him here use the color dynamics setting turned on with this brush, and it does help add a bit of texture. I do think he does include a lot of photo textures to just help, save time. But he does this thing where he saturates certain parts of a painting to a very high level. And a lot of his environments are actually set in a dark, or they're mostly dark, and you can see this kind of special percentage where there's a bit more light. But it's kind of specific, it's not overwhelming the frame. Now this one's more of a natural scene of some kind of night. And I think based on his portfolio, he does more not fantasy, sci-fi types of concepts. Where were we? And he doesn't have a lot of these paintings. Most of his work is, again, 3D rendered. Maybe with some Photoshop post-processing, but yeah. And this is another example of his use of very, very specific saturated parts, right? He likes to add all sorts of like glowy types of textures. And it does help make it more concept arty, you know? When you add like glowy types of stuff. Whenever you use color dodge, that's usually an indication of some kind of, if it's not some kind of sci-fi light source or energy source, it could be some kind of magical kind of thing. And it's very common in digital types of artwork. Now this one's more of a keyframe, heavily focused on this character here, this magical mage, riding some kind of dragon, right? You can see a bit of extra dragons here in the background, but it doesn't have a lot of these where it's focused on the character, I think. Right? Maybe a couple, but not too much. At least for his 2D types of artwork, they're very, very focused on environments. I think I skipped one. Oh shit, yeah. And here again, you can see that glowy types of things. And look at how unclean his work is. And it's not a bad thing. It feels more artistic if it's done this way. And maybe, I think he does use the mixer brush a lot because you can see this sort of fade out effect where the pixels kind of merge. And he tends to do it in a vertical manner, right? So it's not super messy. There's a bit of technique involved, or a personal kind of process. Here you can actually see a bit of photo textures involved, and his work does tend to look like a mixed media kind of painting, right? And it feels more vibrant that way because you can see a lot of hue variety in his work, right? But also a lot of brush variety and even techniques. It's not just one type of painting, right? It's more, is flamboyant the word? It's more expressive, I think, and less technical, I think, or it looks less technical, right? For his environments, again, he does focus more on. No, this one is a very longitudinal kind of a shot, cinematic shot. It's pretty rare to see this in films, but you know, fuck. But it's a great way to kind of capture an entire kind of scene. You can see this. I'm not sure if this is some kind of crater, maybe, because it's too straight of a line, right? So maybe this could be like within some kind of crater, and then something is kind of emanating in this area. And then we have a person here to indicate some scale. And he does blend pretty well. He's kind of like Ru Xingao, where he blends the photos well with his painting techniques. And look at how he did the sky. It's not even that super clean. Again, he likes to do that mixer brush thing where he just lets things merge. Now he doesn't overdo it because sometimes I have a habit of mixing a bunch of things and my work sometimes tends to look kind of blurry just because of overuse the mixer brush. For him, obviously this is going to be way sharper because this one is more closer to you, right? So it's not that important to kind of mix things in this area. But as you fade out, he can be more playful with the mixer brush. And obviously in the sky and the clouds, they're going to be a bit more random. So it kind of makes sense to use the mixer brush, right? Or maybe he does use the smudge tool, but I'm guessing it's the mixer brush. No, this one. It's another landscape piece. It's kind of giving me the vibes of Skull Island. But look at the amount of hue variety in this foreground. Lots of purples, lots of blues. And you can see these sorts of anthills, maybe? Maybe this is some kind of symbol. Some kind of markings on the wall. I'm not sure what that orange bit is, but there's something here in the, it's in the very background, some kind of light source, right? So birds, adds a bit of life. It's kind of boring actually. I mean, it looks good, but it's kind of quiet. Maybe that's the word. It's kind of quiet, but just adding these sorts of elements here, just adding some birds, adds a bit of life to your painting, right? It's pretty common to do this in a lot of architectural illustrations or renderings. Just add some birds. It will make it look more lively and yeah. Again, more of that glowing stuff, right? He kind of saturates certain parts. I'm probably with the color dodge layer mode, and his painting style reminds me a bit of Scott Gadil. I think I did add him to my list of artists to review. It's a bit random. Lots of overlaying strokes. It feels like, or it looks like the lasso tool was used to paint sometimes. It kind of has that feeling, or maybe he uses a brush that has wet edges on, because you can see a lot of like the edge. You can see the edge of the brush strokes pretty clearly. So he kind of builds up the painting that way. He's not very opaque like Derek Zabrocki, you know? He kind of builds up the paint, Scott Goodell, and I think Mark Kolobaev is the same way. Very, very opacity driven, where you kind of build the value stroke by stroke, right? And you can see it if you just zoom in. It's not a super solid type of rendering or painting style. And you can see this value, this subtle value variation. Like, it looks, even if this whole thing is almost one value, it has a lot of different values. So it's not going to be completely boring. And the nice touch of it is the glowing parts, which I like. Oh, some people here to indicate some skill, some markings, right? In this case, he actually made the water kind of glow a bit. Makes sense. Some photo textures here. Look at how it's not even that messy, because you can actually tell which is which, right? Like the forms are pretty much clear, especially in the foreground. Obviously, it gets vaguer in the background, but kind of reminds me a bit of Feng Zhu, right? Because if you zoom in into his work, it's not even that super refined, but concept-wise, you can kind of see what the idea is about, because he focuses more on the bigger picture. And I guess Mark Kolobaev is the same. A grayscale concept. And I've seen a lot of artists do really, really interesting environment concepts just in grayscale. Obviously, it helps save time. And again, what's usually important is the values anyway, and not so much the color, because you can always edit the colors as you go. But you can tell a lot by just the lighting without the colors. You can tell the mood of it. Obviously, colors do help add a bit more context, but it's not the primary thing that's leading the idea, right? Or that's expressing the idea. Here you can even see the rough overlay of this texture, or of this photo texture. So it's not super clean, but it makes sense. It's darker here in the foreground. It gets lighter as you go further out, right? And again, he's really into landscapes with his 2D paintings. Another one, you can see him use the lasso tool here for some vines. Here it's just one big photo bash of some kind of tree trunk, perhaps, or some rock that has some kind of vines. And again, it's not super clean. You can tell he actually expanded the photo, so you can see that kind of pixelation of the photo texture, right? But it also makes sense, or maybe he did blur it, because the focus is actually in this area, because this area has the most contrast anyway. So it kind of makes sense that this whole thing is not even that clear, so that your eye will kind of, be more in this area, right? You can tell there's a bit more, again, contrast, detail, right? Yeah. Ooh, big photo texture here, right? Photo bashing. Really helps you save time, right? And it's pretty good with the lighting. Sometimes I do this thing where I just use a soft brush and then add this kind of ray of light. It's so typical and basic, but even though his work is pretty rough, or his concepts are, not super clean, it feels realistic. He doesn't go as far as Ru Xingao. Ru Xingao does bring it to an extra level, to an almost illustration kind of level, but this kind of illustration or concept is enough to communicate something, and it actually looks good. It doesn't have to look good up close anyway, right? So yeah, again, glowy stuff. Now this one, he had some birds. Great. Look at how big this image feels. Now it makes sense. Now the birds, I think, do help in suggesting that that kind of grand feeling of this snowy volcanic mountain thing. But and there's hardly even clarity. There's not. This whole scene isn't even too clear. You can obviously see a bit of lava in this area. You can see some sharpness in this area. You can obviously tell it's in a snowy kind of environment or cold environment, right? But a big chunk of it is kind of just a mystery, right? It's kind of just left up to you to kind of imagine, right? What I do like about this is how it feels big. You know, the atmosphere is there, right? Now this one's more of, again, another landscape, more of a swampy kind of area. More contrast here and here. Again, the glowy kind of thing. And you can see it even in his renderings here. He likes the glowy aspect, the saturated focus on certain parts, right? And it does make his work very lively. And it does catch the eye more, right? Very, very stimulating, I guess. That's the word, stimulating. So more grayscale environments, concepts for Fallen, right? Great keyframes. Now for these shots right here, they're actually almost like a 1:1 kind of ratio. So, I mean, you can always expand it, right? But yeah. And look at how epic they look. They all technically work. If ever you decide to color it or paint over it even more, it's going to still look pretty good, right? And they're not even that super complicated. It's actually fairly simple, but it works. But sometimes I feel like like the environments have to be in this kind of dynamic kind of shot always to kind of garner attention. But it can, for the most part, be a waste of time. I mean, this one's pretty. It's like a 3-point perspective, worm's eye view. It's pretty dynamic, but not all of the shots ought to be like this. You know, it can be just a simple kind of stable shot, right? It doesn't have to be like some kind of complex scene. It can be kind of quiet in this way. And yeah, you can always save the more complex ones for later on, or you can do them once in a while, but I think you'll save or you'll communicate more ideas if you just keep it simple, essentially, right? More thumbnail concepts. Here he does use more photo textures, more photo bashing is involved, and the atmosphere is still there, right? And look at how dark most of it is. The only thing that's kind of light is this part. It's kind of in a morning type of setting. They're just leaving this kind of grand cave, but everything else is he kind of focuses the light on specific areas, right? This one's actually a bit foggy, but you can tell it's obviously day in a way, right? It's like a 5% super white, almost white kind of area. Heavy contrast in his work. So these are actually more paintings than more painted than photobashed, and they still work. It's still heavy in terms of contrast. Look at how he does the glowing thing here, right? Very, very specific areas. And what's so cool is that he doesn't overdo it, and it's not mess. I mean, it is impressionistic in a way, very, very bold and direct, but it's not super like random. And it's clear enough that you can imagine something in it. For example, you can tell this could be some kind of castle, right? You can implant your imagination in his silhouettes, because the silhouettes are fairly clear anyway. And look at how almost all of these shots are kind of standard shots. The horizon line is just there, right? It's just horizontal. Now for this one, maybe it's kind of skewed, or maybe not, right? Most of it is just a pretty stable kind of shot, It's not super dynamic, not super complicated, but it's still, yeah, it still works, right? Now here is more of an underwater scene, scuba divers, in a lava, volcanic, underground or underwater setting, right? I'm guessing he did use the smudge tool in some areas to kind of drag some paint around, even in this part right here. It's actually great using the smudge tool for design purposes, to kind of help sculpt certain forms. I do know Sparth does the same thing with a round brush as his smudge tool. And I've seen other artists, design guns with that kind of technique, and it works. And it does make it creates this cool effect as well, Now this is more of a compilation of his environment designs, right? Look at how most of them are landscapes. Wonderful colors. You can still see that strong contrast, right? And each image has a dominant kind of color. Green, green, kind of a red, green, 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 red, yellow, orange, green, orange, blue, green, or green, and then brownish yellow. Here it's kind of, it's warmer still, right? And he likes putting in that, or focusing in some colors, or saturating certain colors with the, I'm guessing, the color dodge layer mode, or the color dodge tool. Assuming he flattened the whole layer thing, or his whole set of layers, right? And the scenes are not that, complicated. Now this one is pretty, it's pretty skewed. It's almost like a dynamic shot because it's kind of on the side. Yeah. And it all looks interesting. All have some photo textures in them to kind of, it helps add a bit of detail, helps to save time, but obviously he is the leader of the painting. He does most of the work, and the photos or the textures just kind of help adding a bit more realism to his work, right? But at the same time, you can still see that kind of artistry in his work. Very, very standard, I would say, concept art painting style approach. Ooh, I think I'll make this the thumbnail for the art review. More of a keyframe, but you can see him use the mixer brush here, and it looks so epic. It's a keyframe, essentially. When it comes to keyframe art, I also recommend the work of Alexander Mandrajev. I did an art review of his work. Awesome dude. I actually think he did a live video today, as of this recording, talking about his process. I did link his YouTube channel in that art review video, so yeah. Now obviously this whole thing is on the cooler side of things. Look at how he did the glowing, saturated types of things here with the color dodge, I'm assuming. And look at how unclear, is that the word? How enough it is, right? You can see a bit of photo texture, or not, it's photo bashing essentially, because he did paint over it to make it his, but yeah. It doesn't have to be super complete to be able to communicate, again, some kind of mood, idea, concept, and it does look pretty badass. And I think he did use photos in the background as well. And I think what makes it look even more painterly and more artistic is the way he does the mixer brush kind of thing, where he blends the paint around. Now I think he does this, I think this could be like a smudge tool maybe, but it helps add that kind of artistic kind of look to his work. Awesome composition, awesome keyframe. Now I think these are actually more of his experimentations. They're like random sketches of his, but I find them the most interesting. Just because that's kind of my thing anyway, 2D art. If you even focus on the background, it does have that very mixed media kind of look to it. Lots of random strokes. It almost looks like abstract art, right? The background. And it does seep in to the actual character. Like you can see this randomness in it. But based on, zooming in, he does still include photo textures, very random photo textures. Well, not fully random, but he obviously has some intention when he does his work, but It's not, again, super clean, right? I mean, the silhouette is clear, and he also likes adding, again, that glowy color dodged kind of effect. Now this is actually more of an orc creature, speed painting. And look at the randomness of it. I think he does use wet edges in some of his brushes, I'm just guessing here. And maybe he does use the lasso tool a lot, or because the brush strokes aren't too consistent, they feel like they jump around, so maybe he does use a brush that has a pen pressure setting that makes it squiggle, kind of like, shit, what's the guy's name I recently reviewed? Kind of like, fuck, what's his name? Oh yeah, Borislav Mitkov. He does have a style where he uses that kind of squiggly kind of pen pressure brush, and it looks good, you know. I mean, maybe if you zoom in it can become a bit too scattered, but if you zoom out, concept wise it makes sense, you know. It does make it look more artsy as well. And this is actually my favorite piece of his. Look at how random and chaotic this thing is, but it feels good, right? Lots of color dodge. Well, not lots, but he obviously used color dodge, or overlay at least, to achieve these sorts of glowy types of effects. But look at the amount of layering involved in this piece. The silhouette, the edge is not too clear, but it's dark enough to be suggested, right? Even this shield, there's hardly any information here. I mean, you can tell there are a bit of arrows in it because this guy has been, I'm guessing he's in some kind of war environment, in some kind of battleground. There's another character in the back, kind of like him perhaps, some kind of zombie. But yeah, some photo textures here and there. Probably in some kind of overlaid. Obviously, it's not like the main. It's not like a clear kind of photo bashing, you know. It's more of like think of how Feng Zhu does his photo bashing. It's not even photo bashing because he's not bashing photos. He's just adding textures for the most part. Photo bashing is more like Ru Xingao, you know, where he actually takes a part of the photo, kind of like a collage, right? In this case for Mark, he likes to layer a lot of effects together and a lot of brush strokes together. And even the way he did this kind of highlight here, right? It's so fluid. It's so fluidy. It's so shit, what's the word? It's not even that straight. You know, most of his work involves like very loose types of strokes, right? It's not super refined, not super tight. Maybe that's the word. It's not. His work is not tight, especially when it comes to his 2D experiments or speed paintings or sketches. But it does get the job done. Or I could make this the actual thumbnail instead of this, because this one is way more awesome, right? And look at the amount of hue variety here. It's so colorful. Right? Obviously, if there's more design involved, he'll have to tone down the colors a bit, but he can always reduce the saturation at the very least, and still get that sense of hue variety. But again, color dodge, right? Makes it look cooler, right? More epic. And even here in the bottom part, there's some kind of fire probably. And even the shot is pretty. It's kind of like a 16:9, but it's obviously more of a cinematic keyframe kind of shot, right? It's about it's communicating some kind of story, you know. And obviously the story is this kind of warrior going about some kind of environment scene, right? So that's it for this art review of Mark Kolobaev. Check out his links in the description below. And yeah, keep drawing, keep painting, and stay free.